If you've ever used a web browser to search on Google, watch videos on YouTube, listen to music, read books, play games, or other things, you've definitely used HTML without even knowing it. In this course, you will learn how to build your own web pages using HTML and become a master of HTML. I'll also put the timestamps of each part of the video in the description below, so if you feel comfortable with something, you can skip it and move on to the next part, or later if you felt that you need to watch some parts again, you can come back and watch those parts. And you can also find all the codes we'll write in this video on my GitHub page. For that, check the description below. Okay, before diving into HTML, let's first answer some questions. What is HTML? It stands for HyperText Markup Language. It's a markup language that allows you to create web pages, and you have probably already seen memes about HTML being a programming language. Some people say it's not a programming language because it doesn't have some functionalities that a programming language has. Like in a programming language, you can do things based on a certain condition. If you want my opinion, yes, it's not a programming language and it's just a markup language. But truth is, no one cares. If you can use it to do as it's supposed to, then it doesn't matter. It allows you to put text, images, videos, forms, and links on your web pages in a format that your browser can understand. Okay, what is CSS? It stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It's a style sheet language that allows you to style your web pages. It allows you to change the look of your web pages, like the color, the font, the size, the background, etc. This is Google without CSS, and this is Google with CSS. So now you know what is HTML and CSS and why you need them. I mean, look at this, then look at this one. There's no better way to show it. In this video, we will talk about HTML, and in the next video, we'll talk about CSS. Okay, so before we start, you need to have an editor to write your codes and a browser to view your web pages. And my recommendation is VSCode as the editor and Chrome as the browser. I put their download links in the description of the video. So if you don't have them, you can download them from there. Okay, first let's do what everyone does when they start a new thing in the programming world. Print out a line of text, and usually it's a hello world. So for HTML, just create a file with HTML as the extension and put the text hello world there. So save this as index.html in somewhere like your desktop. And open it with your browser. I'm going with Chrome, and you should see this. Okay, as you saw, we didn't have to do anything special, just like a simple text file. But if you right click on the page and click on Inspect, you see this. Here on the Elements tab, you can see the actual source code of the page. But we didn't write this. We just type the hello world text. You see this because an HTML file is not just a simple text file. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to learn HTML. So, because our previous code wasn't valid, so most browsers are smart enough to fix it for us. Thus, we'll see this. So let's go back to our editor and this time write a valid HTML code. Now, before we start, you need to know what HTML elements are. So this is an HTML element and this is an HTML tag. HTML elements are the building blocks of HTML pages. HTML elements tell the browser how to display the content on the page. They usually look like this. This is called a start tag or an opening tag. Then, just like the start tag, there's the end tag or closing tag, but it has a forward slash before the element's name, so that's an end tag. And the content comes between these tags, and the content itself can also be HTML tags or just simple text. So HTML elements can be nested. And because the content is inside the tags, it's indented. So if you put other HTML elements inside an HTML element, we call the first level element a parent element, and what's inside it is the child elements. If you're using a modern editor like VSCode, your editor will do the indentation for you, but if you're using a simple text editor, you'll have to do it yourself. But we have also some tags that don't contain any content, so they're called void tags or empty tags or self-closing tags or contentless tags, whatever. And since they're empty and nothing gonna come between their start and closing tags, then they have only one tag, like the image tag. As you see, it doesn't have any content, but it has a source attribute. Technically, all HTML elements can have attributes to tell the browser additional information about the element. In this case, the source attribute tells the browser where to find the image. It can be a local file or a remote file from the internet. We'll see more about image tags later. For each element, we can have attributes especially for that element, or we have global attributes that can be used by all elements. You may also see void tags like this instead of this. This is a line break tag, but basically this kind of syntax belongs to the XHTML standard, which is an older version of HTML, but it's also supported by HTML5. So if you saw somewhere tags like this, don't get confused. Okay. The doctype or document type is the first thing that gets written in an HTML file, and it's like this. An open angle bracket, an exclamation mark, doctype, then specify the type of the document, and for HTML5, which is the latest merger version of HTML, type HTML. Then a closing angle bracket, and remember, for HTML5, we use HTML, not HTML5 or something else. It's not an HTML element or tag. It just tells the browser what kind of document it's dealing with. Because your browser may also support other standards like XHTML, which their doc type is pretty longer than this. So you need to specify what kind of document you want to write. Since the doc type is case insensitive, it doesn't matter you write it in uppercase or lowercase. In fact, if you go to google.com and view the page source, you can see that it's written in lowercase. But if you go to facebook.com, you'll see that it's written in uppercase. Next, we need to create the HTML element, and it's like this. Opening tag HTML and closing tag HTML. The HTML element is the root element of a HTML document. This is where you actually put all the HTML codes except the doctype, which should be the first thing in the document, and the HTML element should come after the doctype, because you specify what type of HTML you're using for the browser to understand, then the browser use the type you specify to understand your HTML codes inside the HTML element. Usually, people also use the lang attribute to specify the language of the text that they're going to put inside the HTML element. So lang equals en for English. Next, we have the head element, and it's like this. Opening tag head, then closing tag head. This is usually the first element inside the HTML element, but it's optional. It contains the meta tags and the title of your page, and everything inside the head element will not display on the browser. Here, you can also import external style sheets and scripts. So first, let's add a title to our HTML page. So title home. Now if you save this file, then refresh the page, you should see the title of the page at the top of the browser tab. Okay, inside the head, we can also create meta tags. Meta tags are used to specify some meta information about the page. Look, meta. And here we can use special attributes to specify the information, like the character set of the page, which is UTF-8 by default. So character set equals UTF-8. But if we don't specify the character set, it still is fine, because as I said, browsers will automatically use the UTF-8 character set by default. So it's not important, but it's good to specify the character set. You don't know which browser your user is gonna use to see your page, so you should be ready for everything. The next meta tag is really important. It's called the viewport tag. It's used to specify the size of the browser window. Look, name equals viewport, content equals width equals device width, and initial scale equals 1.0. If you want your page to be responsive and look good on all devices, you should use this tag. Most of this stuff to make your page responsive will be with CSS, but for the HTML part, you need to set the width of the browser window to whatever the width of the device is, and the initial scale to 1.0. You may have seen some websites on your phone that in order to view the whole width of the page, you needed to move the page by your finger. That's what happens when you don't use the viewport tag. The viewport tag can have other contents like minimum scale, maximum scale, and user scalable, which is a yes or no, and it's yes by default. If you set it to no, the user cannot zoom in on the web pages. The next meta tag is XUI compatible. The XUI compatible meta tag allows web auditors to choose for which version of Internet Explorer the page should be rendered. That's because Internet Explorer has always been a nightmare for web developers. So if you want to make your page compatible with IE, you should use this tag. So HTTP equip equals XUI compatible. And because Microsoft recommends Edge mode since IE 11, we set it to IE Edge mode. So content equals IE equals Edge. Edge means IE should use the latest version of its rendering engine to render the page. These three meta tags here are what you usually see in the head of the HTML page, but we have other tags too. We have the description tag. Usually people see your description and title. In the search engine results, we have a bunch of other tags for search engines like keywords tag, but don't put too many keywords in it, okay? It may even have a bad effect on your website's SEO. And remember, these days, search engines are smarter than that. In the past, these three tags, title, description, and keywords, would have a good impact on the search engine results for your website. But since search engines are a lot more powerful than before, so it's not that important for your page SEO anymore. But I'm not an SEO expert, so another useful tag that you may see in the private websites in some organizations, sites that are not public, is the robots tag. Look, name equals robots, and content equals no index, no follow. No index so that search engines won't index your page, and no follow so that search engines won't follow the links on your page. Or you can simply type none instead of no index and no follow. Most search engines, especially the famous ones, will understand it and will not index your page. So there are plenty of meta tags, but for now and for the purposes of this video, the ones we've talked about are more than enough, and for this project, these three are enough. Next is the body tags. So body, here inside the body, we can put all the content of the page that we want to display. For example, our hello world. So now on your browser, refresh the page, okay? There are some extensions for VSCode that will refresh the page every time you make a change in the editor. But because I want this video to be useful for everyone, even the people that never have used VSCode before, so I'm gonna stick to the old way of refreshing the page. Okay, in real world websites, you usually have more than just a simple hello world text. You need headings, sometimes you need bold text, sometimes you need italic text. So you need different tags to display these different types of text. For heading, HTML has 6 different heading tags for different sizes. Look, the largest one is H1, so H1, heading 1, and the smallest one is H6, so H6, heading 6. Now if I save this and refresh the page, as you see, the headings look like this. Now to practice, add heading 2, 3, 4, and 5 here in your HTML file. Usually we will do this kind of stuff, changing the font size, making the text bold or italic, and so on in CSS. So it's actually CSS's job. But these are good for your website SEO, especially H1. And remember that use only one H1 per page as the title of your page. Then go down H2, H3, H4, H5, then H6 if necessary. So search engines will know what your page is about, but you won't get any errors if you use more than one H1 in a page. It's just good practice. Okay, for paragraphs, we have the P tag. So P. Now inside the P tags, you can put whatever you want. If you're using VSCode, you can just type lorem, then hit tab. So VSCode will put some dummy text for you here. Or type how many words you want after lorem, then hit tab. So lorem 20. Save. Refresh the page. See? Now we have a paragraph with 20 words on our page. Again, it's CSS's job to style text and stuff, but we can also use some special tags to kind of style our content. I leave a link to a good resource for all of them in the description below, but for now let's stick to the most important ones. Look, we have the strong tag, so strong, strong, and the B tag for bold, so B, bold. Save, refresh, and they look exactly the same, right? Then what's the difference? Well, the strong tag is newer. It came with HTML5. It will tell the browser that the text is semantically important, while B tag tells the browser explicitly to render the text as bold. If you use the B tag, a text-to-speech program may not understand its difference from other texts. So that may cause some users with visual impairments to have a hard time understanding the text. By using a strong tag though, most of the text-to-speech programs will speak the strong text with a higher pitch or a different tone than other texts. So the user will understand that the text is important in some way. And just like the strong and B tags, we have the M and I tags. Look, M, emphasis, and italic. Save, refresh, see, emphasis works the same way as the strong tag, and I works the same way as the B tag. So it's recommended to use the strong and M tags instead of B and I tags. Okay, we can also add comments in our HTML code. There are times when you want to label something in your code without affecting the user interface, or just comment out a piece of code to try another thing. So you need to write something that only appears in your code, but not in the browser. So comments in HTML are like this: open angle bracket, exclamation mark, 2 hyphens, write down your comment, then close the comment by again 2 hyphens but without an exclamation mark, and a closing angle bracket. Now, if I refresh the page in my browser, as you see, the comment will not appear. But if I view the source code of the page this way, you can see the comment along with other parts of the code, which is pretty cool. A good thing to know if you're using VS Code is that you can comment out a line of code by pressing Ctrl and / or Command or / if you're on Mac. And if you do it again, you can uncomment that line of code. That will come in handy if you're using VSCode for your projects. Or if you want to comment out multiple lines, you can select the lines and comment them out using the VSCode shortcut. As long as you put your comment between these signs, every browser will understand that this is a comment. Okay, now that you know how to create HTML elements, you might be asking, what if I want to put an open angle bracket or closing angle bracket in my HTML code? I mean, like this. Now let's refresh the page and see what happens. As you see, our hello world is not displayed. Why? If you look at the source code, you can see that the browser considered the less than and greater than signs and our hello world as an HTML tag. So how can we fix this? Well, we can use character entities. Type an ampersand sign followed by either the entity name or an ampersand sign followed by a hash sign followed by the entity number. Look, ampersand sign less than, or using the number way, ampersand sign hash 60 for less than sign, and ampersand greater than, or using the number ampersand hash 62 for greater than sign. Don't forget to put a semicolon at the end so the browser can differentiate between the main text and the character entity. See? Perfect. Or another example is when we want to put multiple spaces between words. Look. Save, refresh, and as you see, it's not displayed. So to fix this, we can use character entities. Look. Ampersand sign followed by the name of the entity, which is NBSP or non-breakable space. One here, here, and another here. See, I'll put a link to all the character entities in the description below, so go check it out. Okay, sometimes we need an empty line between our text, but if you normally put an empty line between your text, browsers don't render it just like spaces. Look. Save, refresh, see, all those words are still in one line. Then what can we do? Well, we can use another p tag here. Look. See? Or we can use a break line tag. That's right, we have a special tag for breaking the line. Look. Type BR for line break wherever you want to break the line. Save, refresh, see. Another way is to use the HR tag or horizontal line or horizontal rule. Look. HR, save, refresh. Okay, it will break the line by drawing a horizontal line. These kinds of tags are called void elements because they don't and can't have any content. Later on we'll see more of them. Okay, we mentioned that you can use the p tag to put your text in a new line. That's because the p tag is a block element, and a block element will occupy the maximum width of the page. On the other hand, we have inline elements. Inline elements will only take up the width of the text they contain. So let's see. P tag is one of the block elements. So P, don't forget to like and subscribe. as you see, the p tag occupies the maximum width of the page. So your browser will put its content in a new line. But if I use a strong tag here, so strong and strong and again strong and strong. See, now the two strong elements are in the same line because they are inline elements. I'll put a link for both all of the inline and block elements in the description below, so go check them out. Okay, so having a block or inline element is great, but we can't use every tag we want just to use its inline or block features, because each element has a special meaning and has been built for a special purpose. That's why we have meaningless elements in HTML to contain other HTMLs or to group or separate parts of the page. They usually are used for styling purposes, so other than that, it's good to use other elements with specific meaning and don't use meaningless elements unless you really need them. We have the div or division tags, which is a block element. Look, div lorem 20. And span is an inline element, so everything inside the span will be in the same line. Look. Save. Refresh. As you see, the span is in the same line. Usually we use the class or ID attribute of the span or div elements to style them with CSS, which CSS is not what we're going to talk about in this course, but a bit later we'll see how to use classes and IDs. So for now, just note that we can use meaningless elements to group parts of the page. You can also use nested meaningless elements like this. Div and div and div. But it's not a good practice. In fact, it's recommended not to nest meaningless elements deeper than 6 layers. In the next session, I'll show you a good example of meaningless tags. Okay, what if we want to link to another page or even another HTML file? We can't put all of our HTML code in one file, right? Imagine a website as big as YouTube or Facebook. So in HTML, we use the a or anchor tag to link to another page or another website. Look, a, and inside the a tag, type Google, for example. Then save, refresh. See, now you have a link. But if you click on it, nothing happens. That's because we haven't linked it to any page or website. So get back to your HTML code. Now, to link to another page or website, we need to add the href or hypertext reference attribute. So href equals https://google.com. Now, if I get back here and refresh the page, I can go to Google. Cool. Get back to the main page, and because the anchor tag is an inline element, our link will be in the same line along with the previous text. So here's a good use of the div tag. Div, and our element. And because it's a meaningless container element, it's exactly what we want for this kind of use. See, now as we saw, the link opens a new page, and that in a real world project sometimes is not a good thing. You may don't want to send people to another website by closing your page. That's why we have the target attribute. Look, target and underscore blank. Save, refresh the page and click on here again, and see, it opens on a new tab, but if you use the blank target, also add this. Rel equals no opener. It will not set the window opener property, so it will return null to prevent the target to access the current document. And no refer to prevent the browser sending the page address to the target page. The rel attribute will define the relationship between a linked resource and the current document. But if you didn't get any of that, that's fine. When you learn more stuff about web development, you understand these concepts better. Also, in recent versions of browsers, when you set the target to _blank, we do the same thing as setting the rel to no opener. Okay, we can also link to another HTML file instead of external pages. But before that, remember that links are one of the most important things in the whole web development world. And that means there's a lot of stuff that you can learn about them. So I leave a really good link to a documentation on the Mozilla website. So go check it out, okay? Now on VSCode, open your desktop folder. So then new file, carts HTML. On VSCode, I can type an exclamation mark, then hit the tab key to get a boilerplate code for our new HTML file. Then for the title, type cart. Then in the body, type h1 shopping cart. Then go to the index file and type a cart HTML shopping cart. Remember, it's a recommended practice to put the links text inside the A tag. It's good for your SEO and screen readers. Okay, save and refresh the page and click on the link. And you'll see your new HTML file, which is the shopping cart page. Another cool thing that we can do with the anchor tag is that we can link to a specific element on the page. How? Well, first we need a way to specify the element we want to link to. That's where the ID attribute comes in. Usually when we want to do something with a specific element, we can use the ID attribute, especially for styling. We have also the class attribute, which is used for the same purpose, but instead of being unique for a specific element, it can be used for multiple elements. For example, we use the ID attribute to style the header of the page like this. ID equals header. Then in a CSS file, we can use the header ID to give it a style, and it will apply only to the header. And for the class attribute, we can do this. Span class bold. Thanks for buying from us. Then in the CSS file, we can use the bold class to make this span look bold. I just did it to give you an idea of how IDs and classes are used in HTML. We use the header ID just for a specific h1 element, but we can apply the bold class to multiple elements. But let's get back to what we were doing here. Using the ID attribute and the anchor tag, we can link to a specific element. So if I put some dummy text here just to fill the space, so p lorem 3000, and to make it sense, we can use a header like terms and conditions, like h2 terms and conditions. Okay, we're successfully building the dummiest shopping cart ever, so be proud of it. As you see, now in order to get to the bottom of the page, we need to scroll down, and to get back to the top or to the header, we need to scroll up. I mean, imagine it was a long page and we want to go to the header. Well, that can take a lot of time. Well, we can use IDs to make it easy. Since IDs should be unique, we can use the ID attribute to link to a specific element. Look, A, click to jump to the header, then href equals, and use the hash sign, then type the ID of the element you want. For me, the header. We usually use the hash sign for IDs in most places, just remember that. Okay, save, refresh, because we use the p tag, the next element will go to the next line. Now click on the link. Wow, cool, huh? You probably have seen this before, right? A button in the bottom corner of the page that when you click on it, it will scroll to the top of the page. Well, that is exactly what we did. However, if you put only the hash sign here, it will scroll to the top of the page. So a href hash sign go to top. Save, refresh, and as you see, it will scroll to the top of the page without linking to any element. So anchor tag is really important in HTML. There are many other things that we can do with it, like call a number, send an email, run JavaScript codes, or the exclamation mark will link to nothing, so it will actually work more like a button. Okay, now let's talk about images. What is a website without images? Well, just like anchor tags, you can add images to your website locally or remotely. Look, img, then for the source of the image, we can use the source attribute. Look, source equals https:// unsplash.com /random. It's just a link from Unsplash that gives us a random image. Save, refresh, and here's our image. Now, what if there were some problems with the image or the link? Well, let's see. So here, let's remove these two letters from the URL. Then save, refresh, and see. You may have seen this placeholder before in websites, and this appears when something goes wrong. Maybe someone removed the image from the server, or we're using the wrong link. So our browser can't find it. So for search engines and some users with visual impairments that are using screen readers, we can use the alt attribute. It's basically an alternative text in case the image is not rendered properly. So for important images, please use the alt attribute like this. Alt equals random image. See? Now it's better. Please use the alt attribute for important images. So if you have a background image that doesn't have any textual content, then you don't need to put some words in the alt attribute. Just leave it empty, like this. This way, screen readers will understand that this is not an important image. Okay? Don't worry about the image size. You will make everything look good later when you learn CSS. Though we can change the size of the image with the width and height attributes for now inside the HTML file. So width 100 and height 100. Oops, let's fix this. Source on Splash. Now save, refresh, and here's our image. These are in pixels, by the way. But as I said, changing a style in HTML is not recommended, and you should use CSS for that. Okay, we've used a remote image here, but let's change it to something more relevant to our shopping cart. So I put a cart icon in the project directory. You can check the description if you want. If you want this image, by the way, and source equals cart.png. Okay, this is a bit better, but since we're not using CSS in this course, this page is still so ugly, so don't blame me. This is the best you can do with just HTML alone, and I know, it sucks. Okay, now let's create a list of items in our cart. In HTML, we have two types of lists, ordered and unordered. For unordered lists, we have the UL tag, and for ordered lists, we have the OL tag. And for the items in the list, we have the LI tag or list item tag. Look, UL, LI, item 1, item 2, item 3, and OL, item 1, 2, and 3. Save, refresh, and as you can see, this list is unordered and this list is ordered. Okay, with this knowledge, let's create a navigation bar using an unordered list. So let's move these two lists. Then here on the top of the page, after the h1 element, type div ul li anchor tag href index.html home and li card. Now save, come back here, refresh the page, and you will see the navigation bar. This will take you to the home page. Now let's copy our navigation bar to the index.html. So okay, and because we're already in the home page, we don't need to link to that. So okay, but we need to link to the cart page. So save, and as you can see, the navigation bar is here. Now go back to the cart HTML. Okay, this is a good example of how to use the list tags, but note that in HTML5 we have the nav tag, which is specially for navigation bars, and we're going to use it later. Okay, next let's create a table for the items in our cart. For tables, we have the table tag, and inside the table we have table head or T head, table body or T body, and table footer or T foot, which is not very common. And inside them we have table rows and table cells. Let me show you. So table, now we need to create the table head. So T head. Now here we need to use table headers or TH tags for our table head, which are like the titles of the columns, which means there are also columns. And in HTML tables, for columns, you need to create a table row first. So tr, then let's create our column titles. So th image, th product name, th color, th price, th quantity, and th total. And HR tag would be nice here. So, and then another one after the table element. So, okay, then let's add some table data for our table body. So, table body. And again, to create some column data, we need to create a table row. So, tr, then let's add some images to our project directory. Okay, you can find their download links in the description below. img source font.jpg alt font width 50, height 50. Then for the product name, usually you need to also have a product page to link to, but since we don't have that page, we can just put the product name here. So product name, TD, best font. And for the color, I choose black. So color, TD, black. And price, TD 300. Then for the quantity, TD 3. Then let's add the total price, which is the price multiplied by the quantity. So total 600. Now let's copy this row here to create another row. So okay, then change the image to t-shirt PNG and the alt attribute to t-shirt or whatever image you're using. Then change the product name to cool t-shirt, price to 99, quantity to 1, and total to also 99. Now save, refresh, and here's our table. I know it's not pretty at all, but this is how HTML looks without CSS. Okay, next we have input elements. In case you need some specific type of information from the user, look. Input. As you see, there are void elements, so there's only one tag, and there are also inline elements. Now, with the help of the type attribute, we can change the type of our input element. By default, the type is text. We have lots of different types like password, tail, color, etc. So let's get a password input. Input type password. Now if I type something in the text field, it will display normally. But if I type something in the password field, it will be hidden. So one attribute is type. Another one is name, which is the name of the input element like password. So name equals password. After submitting the form, results will appear by the name we set here and the value that the user entered. And we have a few more like placeholder equals enter your name, value equals Ali in case you know the user's name and you want to fill the input for the user. Required to tell the browser that it's required for submitting the input. We'll see it in action later when we create a submit button or autofocus. To focus the input when the page loads or read only to make the input read only. Okay, so that's why we need different types. So here instead of a simple text, if we want to have a field for the user to change the quantity, we can do this. Input type number, name quantity, value 1. And because the quantity can't be just any number, we can limit it to min 1 and max 20. And copy this, paste it here, change its value to 3. Save, refresh, and see it's a number. So we can't type anything here but numbers except for the minus sign, plus sign, and E because we're using them to show different types of numbers. But since we limited the number to be between 3 and 20, we can't put a number less than 3 or more than 20 here. Another cool thing that we can apply to the number input is the step attribute. It will also apply to some other input types like range, date, and stuff like that. Look, step equals 5. If I come here and click on the up arrow, it will increase the value by 5 instead of 1. Same with the down arrow. We can also use the arrow keys on your keyboard to increase or decrease the value of the number input. Now that we changed the input field that gets the quantity, we can also improve the color field with the help of the select element. Look, the select element generates a drop-down list of options for the user to choose from. Look, come here where the color of the item is, then remove black and type select option black option red. Then copy and paste it here too instead of black. Then save, refresh, and see, now I can choose my favorite color from this drop-down list. So there are times like this that in order to get a specific value from the user, we need to use something other than the input element. To get more familiar with the input elements and their types and other types of inputs, let's create an HTML form. In a registration page, we can also check the description below because I will put a good reference for different types of HTML inputs. Okay, to create a form, create a new file, name it register or whatever you want. Type an exclamation mark and hit tab to get a boilerplate HTML code. Change the title to registration. Then type form. Forms can have an action attribute that will define the action to be performed when the form is submitted. Look, it can be a script or like action.php or simply a link to another page like index.html. So the form will be submitted to that page, or if we don't specify this, the action, it will be submitted to the same page. Like this. Now another attribute for the form tag is the method attribute, which is the way we will send the data to either another page or to a server. Look, method equals, now if you type get here, the form's data will append to the URL when you submit the form. So if you want to send the data to another page, you can do that on the page and get the results on another page using something like JavaScript. But if you want to send the data to a server, you can use post like this. But for now, let's go with get. Okay, what to put inside the form? Well, we can put input elements because that's what they are built for, right? Let's cut these two input elements from the cart page and paste them here inside the form. It's better to also move terms and conditions to the registration page. So and these two links should be outside the form, and I think one of them is enough. So okay, now let's link to the registration page. So register HTML, please register to proceed to the checkout. Okay, now let's make it more like a form. So it's going to be a registration form. So registration, and we can specify labels for the inputs. Look, label, name, and this label is for the first input, which is the name. So for name. And let's remove the read-only attribute. So okay, and since labels can't find their input elements randomly, we need to add an ID attribute to the input elements. So ID equals name. Now, if I click on the label, it will focus on the input elements that we can type in it. That's why I removed the read-only attribute. You can also put your input element inside the label in order to focus on it when you click on the label. But most people use for and ID for that. It's just a bit more clear, especially for applying styles to the labels and input elements separately. Now, let's do the same thing for the password input. But before that, let's remove some of the useless attributes. So okay, then let's create the label for the password input. Label for password and password. Now that we know what's the ID attribute's purpose, then you may ask, what about the name attribute? Well, it's for when we want to send the data to the server or another page. Look. Now, if I create a submit input at the end of the form. So input type submit. As you see, it will create a tiny cute submit button. Now, if I click on the submit button, the form will be submitted to the same page because we didn't specify the action attribute and because we set the method to be get. And we should see our forms data in the URL. So see, it's not gonna work because we didn't fill the required field, which are password and name inputs. That's why we're getting this error message. But now, so as you can see in the address bar, the forms data is sent to the same page. Okay, we did kind of validation by putting the required attributes in our inputs, but the main validation should be done on the server side, though it's good to have it on the client side too. Another cool but not very common input type is the hidden input element for times when you want to send data to somewhere, in our case to the same page, but you don't want the user to see or interact with it. Look, input type hidden, name something, value 1, 2, 3. Now here, if I fill the required fields and click on the submit button, as you see, something is 1, 2, 3. Cool, huh? This is for the times when you want to send something to the server along with the forms data, but you don't want to show it to the user. But as I said, it's not common. And also there are better ways to do it when you've learned JavaScript. Now, get back here. Let's talk more about submit input. You may see submit buttons in forms using the input element with the type submit, just like we did. And to change the text of the button, you can use the value attribute. Look, value equals register. But a newer and more common way is to use the button element. Look, button type submit and register. Another cool type of button that people use is the reset button. Look, button type reset and reset. Now, if I fill the fields and click on the reset button, the fields will be cleared. It's good for the times when users want to start over and clear the fields with one click. We also have an input type named reset, which is the same as the reset button, just like what we had with the submit button, but I'm not gonna go into that now because it's not very common. Okay, next is for the email. So let's separate them with comments. So name, password, email. Also, let's put each field in a separate line. So div, and div, and a br tag after each label. So okay, now for the email, type label for email colon, input type email, name email, ID email, and it is required. Now, because we put the type on email and it's required, it will check if it's the correct email address or not. And if the entered email is not correct, it will not submit the form, and also users' keyboard will be optimized for typing email on smartphone devices. So it's really important to choose best type for your input. And placeholders would be nice in every registration form. So placeholder example at mail.com. Placeholders will help users to know what to type in. Okay, now to practice, try to put other types of input elements like tail, date on your HTML page. And of course, it's not an actual form. In a real form, you may see a lot more stuff like first name, last name, middle name. It depends on what type of data you need to collect from the users in order to give them some kind of service. Okay, I'm gonna show you 3 other types of inputs: text area, radio, and checkbox. So for the address, type address, div, label for address, address, text area, ID address, name address, placeholder, enter your address. As you see, a text area tag is just like an input tag with the type of text, which is the default type. So what's the difference between a text area and text input? Well, a text input only allows one line of text, but a text area allows multiple lines of text. So it's good for cases like address, bio, description, message, etc. We can also change the exact size of the text area like this. Text area rows 4 calls 50, which is a recommended because browser defaults can differ. Now that we know about text area tag, let's change the terms and condition element, which is a p tag, to a read-only text area. So okay, now as you see, the default size of the text area is not very good. So let's change the size of the text area to be more suitable for our form. So rows 10 calls 80. Okay, it's better. And we don't need this go to top link anymore. So okay, next we can use the radio input. They're really useful for selecting something between a bunch of options. So for example, account type, div input type radio. Now let's create the label. Label. Note that we want to create 3 radio buttons, one for standard, one for gold, and one for platinum. So label for standard, label for gold, and label for platinum. And let's set the IDs. So standard, gold, and platinum. And here's our radio buttons. And names in radio buttons are a bit different. If you want your radio buttons to work as a grub, you should set the name to whatever these 3 radio buttons represent. If you don't, they will be independent. Look. See? This is not what we want, right? We want them to be as a grub. So by selecting one of them, the other 2 will be deselected. So they should have the same value for the name attribute. So name equals account type here and here. Now it's fixed, but something's missing. That's right, it should have a label. Now the users should know what to select. What are these 3 options for? So one way is to wrap all of them between div tags and add a text inside the div tags, like this. Okay, but as you can see, it's not very good. I know we're not using CSS, but we can't let our page look ugly. At least we can try other ways. Well, there is another way. Look, 2 tags help us in a situation like this, that we want to wrap a bunch of elements as a grub with a label on top of it. So those 2 tags are field set and legend. Let's undo what we did before. So Okay, now instead of div, wrap all of these radio buttons between two field set tags. So field set, okay, wow, what it does, draw a box around the elements inside it. And for the label, it has a special element called legend, which is a text that will be displayed on top of the box. Look, legend, and choose your account type. Save, refresh, and see, it's a lot better than before. But if I fill all the fields like this, and click on the register button, I'll get an account type on, which means it's selected. But it doesn't tell us which option is selected. Is it standard or gold or platinum? Well, that's because we didn't set a value attribute for our radio buttons. Because in other fields, you can type something in them. But fields like radio buttons, it can only tell you if it's selected or not, which on means it's selected, and if it's not selected, it doesn't show up in the address bar at all. So we need to set a value attribute for our radio buttons, like this. Value equals standard, value equals gold, and value equals platinum. Now, if I fill all of the fields and click on the register button, I'll get an account type gold instead of just on in the address bar, which is better. Next is the checkbox input, which is just like the radio input, but it's for selecting multiple options, not just one option out of multiple options. Look. Favorite browser, field set, legend, choose your favorite browser. Div, label for Chrome, input type checkbox, ID Chrome, div, label for Firefox, input type checkbox, ID Firefox, div, label for Safari, input type checkbox, and ID Safari. Oops, I forgot the content for the Safari label. So, okay. It's also a bit different in terms of shape. It's square, but radio buttons are circle. But the real difference is that we can select multiple options, and checkboxes don't work as a graph. Look, even if I give them the same name, like favorite browser, we still can select multiple options. And if I submit the form, so we get 3 favorite browser on in the address bar. So that's the difference between radio and checkbox inputs. So let's fix this. Now here's a challenge for you. Here at the bottom of the page, we need to ask the users if they accept the terms and conditions or not. Remember, yes or no. So pause the video, think about it, then try to implement it by yourself. Okay, congratulations if you've successfully completed the challenge. And yes, we need radio buttons if it's gonna be a yes or no answer. So div, do you agree? Label for yes, yes. Input type radio, name agreement, accepted. ID yes, and it is required. Label for no, no. Input type radio. Name agreement accepted. ID no, and it is also required. Okay, now if I submit the form, so as you can see, it's accepted. In more advanced websites, we can check if the agreement is checked, then register the user. But for now, it's enough. Okay, that's enough with the forms. Now in HTML, there are some semantic elements that can be used to define different parts of a web page. Now let's get back here in the first HTML file, and here we've got a div tag as our navigation bar. But as we know, div tags are not semantic. They mean nothing for search engines and screen readers. We as developers may know that this is the navbar element, but the search engines and the screen readers don't know that. But they know tags very well. That's why in HTML5 we have more meaningful tags, like use a strong instead of be. Because we don't want it to be just bold. We can do that with CSS a lot better. We need to say to search engines and screen readers that this part of the page is important. That's why we have tags like strong, and that's why we can use tags like nav instead of this div tag. So here, change div to nav. I'll leave a link in the description below if you wanted more info about semantic elements, but basically it's just like this. You define different parts of your page with a special tag for that part. This way, search engines and screen readers can understand what's going on and what part of the page is about what. Okay, that was it. I hope you enjoyed the video and have learned something out of it. I will create timestamps for different sections of the video. So later you can come and watch a section, and also I'll put links to some of the best resources for HTML if you wanted to learn more. And I'm going to also record a complete course about CSS. So make sure you're subscribed, and if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you didn't like it, give it a dislike. And if you have any questions, suggestions, or anything, I'll be happy to read it in the comment section. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.